Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Google Plus Hangout with the Buck Institute for Education. I'm John Larmer, Editor-in-Chief at BIE, and our theme for the month has been project-based teaching. So we'll be speaking today with two wonderful guests, Dale Hubert of the Flat Stanley Project and Pearl Arredondo of a school down in Los Angeles, whose name I will let her explain. First of all, a couple reminders about our format. It'll last about a half hour. And you can ask questions on the Google Plus events page, and we will answer them during the Hangout if we can, if I can get them into the conversation, or afterward, or you can leave them on the event page and we'll answer them later. This will be archived at BIE.org, so if you missed part of it or you want to tell a friend, it'll be available for viewing afterwards at BIE.org. Okay, so that's about all. Oh, one more thing. There's a blog on project-based teaching on our website also. You can enter comments there if you like in response to our recent blog by Susie Boss on project-based teaching. That's also at BIE.org. Okay, so let me have our guests introduce themselves. Pearl, how about you first? Whoop, Pearl's internet froze for a second there. Dale, why don't you start while we're getting Pearl's internet back?
Okay, hi. I'm Dale Hubert. I'm a recently retired teacher. I taught special ed for the first 12 years of my career, grade 6 and then grade 3 and 4, closed with one last year of special education. And way back in 1995, I created the Flat Stanley Project.
Okay, and Flat Stanley is pretty famous by now. That's a picture of a Flat Stanley. You got one on the wall behind you?
Got one on the wall, and here's one visiting from Vermont that they sent to me. So right now I'm currently visiting my sister here in Winnipeg, so I brought along this Flat Stanley with me, and I'm going to show them some of the things that happened in Winnipeg before I send them back to Vermont.
Okay, all right. Hi, Flat Stanley. All right, so Pearl, tell us about you and your school. Oh, no, Pearl got bumped off. She'll be back on in a second. All right, so I'll start my first question with Dale then, and Pearl will rejoin us momentarily, I'm sure. So, Dale, tell us a bit about what inspired you as an educator, especially when it comes to project-based learning, but just in general, what do you find inspirational as a teacher?
Well, I was fortunate to have begun my career as a special education teacher, and there was no curriculum for special education. I taught developmental at a school for developmental students, and there was a whole variety of students and a huge range of needs, and nothing in the way of curriculum and very few things in the way of resources. And that was neat because I'd arrived to teaching kind of a convoluted way. My life was singing in the street and then singing in bars. So I didn't have the type of academic discipline that a lot of teachers would have. I was kind of more for the free flow of ideas. And so as a special education teacher, that was perfect. And so I would come up with my own curriculum, my own ideas, and whatever worked for the students. Then when I began teaching regular education, grade 6, I wasn't a big fan of the curriculum. You know, I knew I had to meet the expectations of the curriculum, but I found other ways of doing it as well. And I think that maybe one of the things that we need to remember is the power of anger and frustration. I mean, a lot of teachers just talk about how inspired they were, but let's not forget how frustrating it can be to be a teacher, the lack of resources, and how angry we can be that there's not things in place for the students. And so for me, it was my frustration when there wasn't much on the web in 1995 for students that inspired me to invest the time 19 years later to work on the Flat Stanley Project. In fact, a lot of interesting inventions. Richard Dyson, who invented the vacuum cleaner, was his type of vacuum cleaner, was frustrated by the way the previous ones didn't work. And in an interview, they asked him if he ever got his ideas in the shower, and he said, "Well, only if something in the shower isn't working." So whenever he gets frustrated, he invents a solution. And I know there's a huge amount of frustration out there with teachers. and I'm hoping that they'll find ways to channel that frustration and make things better, like people like Pearl have.
That's a great point, Dale. Or to find ideas for a project, look for problems in the world you're frustrated by and want to solve, or that students find frustrating,
Mm-hmm.
or even righteous anger. I like that as a source of inspiration.
Well, I would have some students in my class, and I remember this one girl came to me and she said, Mr. Hubert, watch out for me, I have anger issues. And instead of saying, whoa, you better control those, I said, that's great. How are we going to make that work for you?
Yeah. All right. You can channel a lot of energy that way. Pearl is back with us. So, Pearl, we're just on the first question. What inspires you as an educator, especially when it comes to project-based learning? But just in general, what do you find inspires you?
I think what really gets me going is the collaboration with teachers and being able to get involved in things bigger than just your classroom. When I first started teaching, it felt so isolated, and it felt like you were just kind of on an island all by yourself. And PBL really gave an opportunity to be creative, to integrate other disciplines, and that was new and exciting. And even now, there's so many more opportunities to get community involved in schools and opening up the doors to classrooms, which is really exciting.
Great. Pearl, I forgot, Pearl, when you got bumped off, I missed your introduction. Please tell us about what you are and your school. Who you are and your school.
Oh, sure. So I am one of the founders of San Fernando Institute for Applied Media. We are an applied media school in the sense of communications. And so we want to make sure that our students are prepared to function at a level where they would be presenting, where they would be collaborating with others as well. And so technology, yes, we use a lot of it, but it's not the primary focus. It's just a tool for us. We are only 400 students, and we are still part of LAUSD, or Los Angeles Unified School District, but we operate under a thinner contract. So our teachers are on a yearly basis re-invited.
And middle school, is that right? Pearl, this is the middle school, is that correct? Grade 6?
Yes, middle school, 6 through 8.
6 through 8. Okay, great, thanks. All right, so let's get to sort of the heart of our discussion. So what do you think are some good sources of inspiration when teachers are finding ideas for projects? Dale, how about you?
Something that really interested me was Kieran Egan's Learning in Depth. And he's at University of BC, and his vision of learning in depth is in grade 1, students are presented with a topic, and it might be dust, it might be the planet Venus, it might be lobsters, anything like that. And they're then to stick with that topic until they graduate in grade 12, at which point they'll be one of the world's leading experts on that topic. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever done it to that extent, but a couple of years ago I had the good fortune of team teaching with Zilla Moss in a grade 3-4 class. So it was a double-sized classroom, and we had almost 50 students there all the time. And we allowed each one of them to pick their own topic that they would work on for most of the year. And some of them did the human body, some of them, one person picked mythical monsters, another person did whales. So then when it was reading time, they would read about their topic. When it was math time, they would find ways of incorporating their research into math. So the girl that did the whales did a Venn diagram of baleen whales and toothed whales and a graph of their various weights. And we were able to meet all the expectations of the curriculum while the kids were doing things that they really were interested in and really loved reading about.
Okay, so the students' inspiration was their own interests. That's a great example. Very ambitious, I must say, to have all those individual research projects going on too. Pearl, how about you? What do you think are good sources of inspiration for teachers getting ideas for projects?
I think for us, because we work in a community with low-income students, we work in a community where there's a lot of outside factors that influence academics in the schools. That really was the source of inspiration for projects. What can we do to reach out to community-based organizations, or what can we do to help solve some of the issues that may be plaguing their outside lives? And so relating it back to language arts or relating it back to historical things, what has happened in the past that have led to revolution, and what can we do to revolutionize what's happening now? And so I think looking at just your own community and your own students, that's where the inspiration comes from.
I like that, Pearl. Could you give us a couple more examples of projects where students have been working in their community or been inspired by their own lives?
Sure. So because we are a technology school, our students make movies, and one of them is based on their own community, and so we have about 5 feeder communities. And they had to identify the positive traits of their community as well as some of the negatives, identify some solutions, research some community-based organizations that could help alleviate or were currently helping to alleviate, whether it was graffiti or helping at food banks, things like that. And so that project really opened their eyes to what's out there already, what resources are they not tapping into, or what else could they actually start to tap into. And what they found was that these community-based organizations have funding to provide for schools. For example, planting trees. Because we are co-located with another school, our side of the school didn't have any green space. And so students realized that there's a community-based organization called Tree.
Is Pearl again? Oh, Dale, I guess it's back to you.
So they reached out to the meeting, and so we have them. Now we have murals on our campus as well.
Okay. All right, thanks, Pearl. Dale, do you want to give a couple examples of things that have inspired teachers you know or people you've worked with in terms of Flat Stanley projects?
Yeah, in the early days of the Flat Stanley Project, I was contacted by a teacher who worked in Brazil at a leper clinic. And a lot of the people, once they went into this clinic, they didn't come out for many years. And her goal was to build a library. And there's no problem finding used books, but the problem is affording to ship them over there. Like, who can afford to ship over a box of books? So what we did instead, people all over, mostly North America, would send Flat Stanleys one at a time to this leper clinic, along with one book. So the Flat Stanley would get mailed back with a cover letter describing what life was like in Brazil and specifically at the leper clinic, and then they'd get to keep the book for the library. And over a period of many months, we helped to actually provide the reading resources they needed for the library.
Wow, very cool. Let's talk a little bit about what the teacher actually does to inspire students in a project. So we talked a bit about how ideas can be inspirational, but what are some of the sort of the nitty-gritty things that teachers do to inspire students? If you could tell some stories about how you've seen teachers inspire their students. Pearl?
I think it's really about picking projects that relate to them. How is it going to impact their lives, or what is it going to do to change their perspective? And I think once you find a project that relates to them, it's fairly easy to get them hooked because they want to do that. They want to, kids really have this desire to do something bigger than themselves. And you just have to give them the opportunity to have that and to feel that. And so when it comes to bringing them into a project, it's driven by them. So it's their ideas, it's how do they want to execute it, giving them that creativity, that freedom to do it is how we've approached it.
Okay. Dale, any tips you can offer or things you've seen teachers do to help inspire their students?
Yeah, I agree completely with what Pearl said. Once the kids get on board an idea, they just run with it. I think a concern for administrators, if they're on board with project-based learning, they need to invite the teachers to get on board as well. I've seen a lot of good ideas that just didn't take off because of the way they were implemented at the teacher level. It was more of a command from the top down rather than something that the teachers could embrace. But once we get, like, one of the problems with the Flat Stanley Project is kids in grade 1, 2, and 3 would just create so much writing that you ended up having to look at and spend time with because they were so enthused. Kids that were previously sort of non-readers, non-writers would really get engaged because they were going to be sending a Flat Stanley to a hockey player they admired or a musician or someone that they had some connection with. And then because there was the website with the blog where we could post their work, they're writing for a larger audience as well. So once the teacher is on side, you've got to get permission to have the kids' work displayed, and there's some logistics like that. But as Pearl said, the enthusiasm of the students will just take things and the kids will run with it.
All right. Pearl, I want to ask you about... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sure. Oftentimes what you thought was going to be a small project really turns into this huge, massive, global thing that you didn't necessarily think it was going to be. And so sometimes it feels like you bit off more than you can chew. And so it's trying to manage some of that. And that's where the collaboration is really key.
Pearl, do you mean collaboration among teachers or
among teachers and administration?
That sort of brings me to a question I was going to ask. At your school, Pearl, what are some of the challenges that teachers have with PBL, and how do you and other school leaders sort of help support teachers through those challenges?
So some of the challenges that we have had are really in the interdisciplinary work. So as teachers by themselves, they've been able to create projects just for their classrooms, but we've tried to take it to the next level and integrate 4 disciplines into one. And so giving teachers the time and the opportunity to plan those projects has been a challenge, and as well as the rubrics that are aligned. What makes a really good project? And if 4 different teachers are teaching the exact same project, does that mean that their stellar one matches to the other teacher's stellar project? Calibrating what quality looks like. And that has taken some time. And I don't think we have fully grasped it yet, but we are definitely working on that.
And you said this is the 5th year now of your school using a PBL approach, right? So it takes a long time to build those practices in teachers.
It does. It does take a lot of time, and I think year 1 and year 2 we focused mainly on just trying to build our school culture. And so yes, we did PBL, but not on a large scale. We introduced it with just a few teachers, and then slowly we try to get everyone. And so now we are full scale model, but still not we're not at the point where we want to be yet. We still have some work to do.
Okay. Dale, I want to hear a couple more examples of Flat Stanley Project. So the one you mentioned before, the leper colony in Brazil, what grade level was that? And can you tell us some other ones, maybe at different grade levels, like what primary students have done for a project involving Flat Stanley, or high school students?
Sure. The one from Brazil that was more of a older people. It was an adult clinic. Younger students from around the world that were sending the books. And one of the nice things about a Flat Stanley is that it crosses the generations. Because you've got a paper Flat Stanley, the message sort of comes from the little flat guy's point of view. So if you talk in a primary language or a limited literacy level, the people don't feel offended because it's coming from here. So younger kids can write to older kids, but since it's coming from Flat Stanley, it's kind of the equalizer across the levels. For example, there was in Indonesia, a number of high schools were using the Flat Stanley Project to learn English as a second language. And so they were high school students who would then take their Flat Stanleys to various places around Indonesia and in their community and write about it to practice their English. But of course, it was also providing insight into their lives that other people around the world could see. Now, because they were high school students, Flat Stanley was having relationships, and there were boyfriend and girlfriend and broken hearts and that sort of thing, whereas typically Flat Stanley does a virtual trip to the fire station and things like that. But the high school students were very enthused. They shared traditional family recipes, all kinds of things that were of interest to them. A thing that's interesting too is that something that's ordinary to us might be extraordinary to someone else. I remember a Flat Stanley arrived from South Africa in my class in Southern Ontario, and I wasn't sure what to do with him. It was winter, and I happened to take the kids outside, and we posed in front of this giant snowbank that the snowplow had piled up, just kind of for nothing else to do. And the kids in South Africa were astonished at this huge mountain of snow, and for us, you know, it's no big deal. The kids in South Africa, you know, wow, that's amazing. And, you know, kids in Australia send a picture of Flat Stanley that's been in a kangaroo's pouch, big deal for them. But for my students and students elsewhere, it's astonishing thing. So I think it's important, too, that kids get to realize the importance and the significance of things that happen in their own lives. We're so surrounded by the power of celebrity, and I think it's important that we get to celebrate some of and the interesting things that we as individuals do.
All right, thanks, Dale. We had a question from a viewer. Sean asked, Pearl, this is for you and your school. Have you evaluated the effectiveness or lack of effectiveness of PBL at your school?
Well, our standardized test scores have gone up since inception, so we have grown almost over 100 points. Now with limited data, it is getting a little bit tougher, but we have employed other assessments that are not statewide, but we are making progress, and so that's why we continue to push PBL school-wide, because we have seen the gains, and especially because we have such a large population of English language learners, it really gives them an authentic way of integrating and working with curriculum and vocabulary and all of that academic language that you used to teach in isolation. And so we are glad of our infusion of PBL, and we're going to continue to push that.
Okay, thanks, Pearl. Another question came from a viewer, which it's again for Pearl, but let me give you a minute to think about it, Pearl, while I answer a couple other quick questions. This person asked about suggestions for professional development for teachers. So think about that for a second, Pearl, and let me answer two questions quickly. I was asked about ideas for projects in the primary grades, and also how you scaffold project-based learning for younger students. Our website has lots of tools for teachers, including a project search tool where you can look for examples of projects by grade level and subject area. Also, I recommend our books. I was a co-author of them, so of course I'd recommend them. One called PBL in the Elementary Grades has lots of information about scaffolding projects for students grades K through 5, and works even up into upper elementary grades, I think, and a lot of project examples there too. So Pearl, how about professional development? Any suggestions you have for that for our viewer?
So we started with the Buck Institute site and all of the freebies that are on there, and that's basically our first year. We really didn't have much experience with PBL, but that's where we started. We started with the books and online resources, what other schools were doing for projects and borrowing ideas. And then we finally got Buck Institute to come to our school and do a full PBL 101. And that really made the difference and had us step up to the next level. And so our next step in professional development is to have the Buck Institute come back and do more of the rubrics training for us, because it is important to be able to calibrate that. But giving the staff time to work together is really important.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, that's often the most powerful professional development is just collaboration time for teachers, time to work. So your school provides lots of time?
We have been trying to, but our teachers also put in a lot of their own time. They come in on a Saturday day and they work together. They stay after school and they work together. And so the dedication of our staff has really made a big difference too.
Okay. There's a follow-up question from Sean about the question about measuring effectiveness of PBL. Yes, are you saying that academic performance is your primary gauge of effectiveness? So I imagine there are other gauges of effectiveness also besides test scores. Can you talk about that, Pearl?
Right. Sure. I mean, if you look at our school culture, if you look at the impact that we're having on the community, our students, they create videos that play on the local trolley system. And so being able to give back to the community, that's big for us. And we want that. So when we look at those data points, then we're making even bigger gains than the academic ones.
All right, thanks. I don't see any other questions yet from viewers popped up. So if you have any more out there, please enter them, and we'll wrap up in a few minutes. Let me just close out by I'll give Pearl and Dale a chance for a last word here. But a great conversation today, guys. Thanks for telling us about inspirational stories about project-based learning and where teachers get ideas and how students can be inspired by PBL. By the way, I should mention that the Flat Stanley Project we hope it will soon become one of our PBLU, our online training program, one of the projects available there. Dale is working with myself and Alfred Solis here at the Buck Institute to develop a Flat Stanley Project for PBLU. You'll be able to see that at pblu.org along with a lot of other projects. So anyway, quick wrap up here. As I said, this Hangout has been archived at BIE.org. You can see it later or tell your friends. And always post questions to the Google Plus events page. And offer comments on the blog post I mentioned. There's one by our director, John Mergendaler, about the gold standard for project-based learning, and a recent one by Susie Boss on gold standard project-based teaching. So please offer comments to those blogs. So before I give a final goodbye, Pearl, Dale, some last words. Dale, how about you?
Well, I think Shauna's comment are wondering about how it's assessed, and there's always the challenge with group-based activities. How do we know if everybody's pulled their weight in a particular group-based activity? And I think that's where there's the value in tying in more almost traditional assessments or opportunities to use their own topic for either whether it's Flat Stanley as persuasive writing or a learning in depth topic as persuasive writing. So you can meet the goals of the curriculum, but you can also bend it enough to engage the students. I think the importance is to have some authentic literacy, authentic math, real life world activities. As a special education teacher, when I had a student, I'd have to picture what are they going to be doing 5 or 10 years from now, and I tried to apply that to my grade 3 and 4 students as well. What would they be doing in the future, and then try to come up with an authentic way of meeting their needs while meeting the needs of the curriculum, assessing their growth, but also engaging them and making them more enthused students. And I think that we sometimes overlook the enthusiasm part, the engagement of the students, but once you have the students on side, it's amazing what you can do.
Great last words, Dale. Thank you. I like the authenticity piece especially. We're very big on that here at BIE. Pearl, some final thoughts? Oh, maybe we lost Pearl again. Maybe she'll get back in a minute. Okay, let me just remind everybody then, we'll be doing another Hangout next week, the 1st of November. Our theme for November is going to be collaboration, student teamwork in project-based learning. And the first Hangout next Tuesday, noon Pacific time, November 5th, will be with 2 educators from the Envision Schools, Bob Lenz, the founder of Envision Schools, Envision Learning, and Justin Wells, who is also on the staff there and a former teacher at one of the Envision high schools in San Francisco. And they'll be talking about collaboration, how to manage student teams, and the importance of teamwork in project-based learning. So we hope you'll join us for that. And Pearl, are you back yet? Nope. Okay, well, thank you, Pearl, very much for joining us. And thank you, Dale. See you on the trail out there. Good luck, everybody. We'll talk to you later. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Stanley.